You may have heard this common phrase before. Christianity is not a religion, it's a relationship. Now you may have asked yourself, what does that mean? Well, in this video, we're going to be unpacking just why it is that Jesus contrasted his new way of living with the religious practices of those around him. Let's dive into it. Hey guys, I'm Ryan, and I'm the Young Adults Pastor at Emmanuel Faith Community Church here in Escondido, California. And our YouTube channel exists to promote the way of Jesus with the heart of Jesus among 20-somethings. In this video, we're going to be tackling the question why Christianity is a relationship, not a religion. Now let me just say up front, looked at from a sociological perspective, Christianity is obviously a religion. A simple dictionary definition of religion is a system of faith and worship. Given that, Christianity is obviously a religion. But is Christianity different as a religion? The answer is yes. So much so, in fact, that Jesus and his earliest followers adopted totally different terms and concepts to communicate that difference. See, it turns out that of all the criticizers of religion that are out there, Jesus of Nazareth is one of the biggest. In Matthew chapter 23, verses 2-4, Jesus tells his disciples, "The teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. So you must be careful to do everything they tell you. But do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. They tie up heavy, cumbersome loads and put them on other people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them." Now, Jesus is saying two things that are significant here. First, he's saying that the religious leaders don't practice what they preach. Later on in verse 5, he says everything they do is done for people to see. And in verse 27, he directly calls them hypocrites. The point is that Jesus is saying that the religion of his day is built on controlling people. And the leaders at the top of this religion were all about image control, which is exactly why they were called hypocrites. The criticisms that Jesus is levying against religion in this passage is that religion is built on controlling people and is compromised by hypocrisy. And this is where I think in the modern world especially, we can relate to what Jesus is saying here. There are so many examples of religious communities or religious organizations controlling their people for ulterior motives, and of their leaders being found out to be total frauds and phonies. In fact, many examples even include Christian leaders. A lot of them do. But it's not just Christianity that has this issue. If you look at Hinduism and the brutal caste system that exists meant to exploit millions upon millions of people, you also have in Islam many women unfairly persecuted for things that they did not do. Even in communism, in which you could argue is a secular religion, is full of examples in which leaders lived very well-off lives, while the peasants that they claimed to liberate remained in poverty. Jesus' criticisms of religion here are self-evident. Contrast all of this with the way Jesus described the way of life he was advocating for. In Matthew chapter 16, Jesus has this to say, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it." Jesus is saying that if you want to follow the way of life he's advocating for, then you must pick up your cross, an instrument of torture and execution, deny yourself, and follow him. But all of this is predicated on whether or not you trust the man himself. Do you trust him when he says, this is the way life was meant to be? A life of self-denial, a life of service, a life of sacrifice. All of it is predicated on whether or not you trust Jesus' perspective on how life should be lived. But even more than that, do you trust who he says he is? Do you trust that he truly was and is God? All that to say, from these passages, we can conclude that Jesus is saying, following Jesus is all about self-denial and is completely predicated on trusting him specifically. The reason why you do or don't do something is based on whether or not you trust him. and you trust who he is and you trust what he says. It's not based on any obligation to an institution, an organization, or a leader. Rather, it is built on trust only on the man himself, Jesus. When you see the difference here, you recognize that religion is built on control, whereas following Jesus is built on trust. But what do you think? Leave a comment below. We'd love to interact with you. You can also listen to a message we just recently gave on this topic in the description below. There's actually a blog post that I personally wrote trying to articulate a more in-depth walkthrough of this topic. All that to say, thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you on the next video.